Ever catch yourself wishing for just a bit more life in your life? Like the days are just kind of slipping away and you're not totally sure what you're, getting back.
Yeah, that feeling of, is this it?
Exactly. Okay, let's unpack this because today we're diving deep into a book that really shook things up for a lot of people regarding work and life. It's The 4-Hour Workweek by Timothy Ferriss.
Right. A pretty controversial title in some ways, but influential.
Definitely. And look, this isn't just some abstract theory. We've got people like Jack Canfield, the chicken soup for the soul guy, and savvy investors like Philtown giving it nods. So our mission here in this deep dive is to pull out the really practical strategies from this book, the stuff you can actually use maybe starting today to get more control over your time and, well, build a life that actually excites you day to day, not just on vacation.
It's interesting how it plugs straight into that desire we all seem to have, isn't it?
Totally.
Wanting more than just the 9 to 5 and hoping retirement works out eventually.
Yeah.
And the fact that you've got, like you said, a motivational guy and the finance expert both finding something in it, it suggests there's something fundamental there about how we want to live.
Absolutely. And the very first thing Ferriss gets into is how we even define success. It's not just about hitting some, big number in the bank. He argues, and this really hit home for me, people don't want to be millionaires. They want to experience what they believe only millions can buy.
That's a powerful distinction.
Isn't it? Think about it for yourself. Are you chasing the actual digits or what those digits allow you to do?
Right. The freedom, the experiences.
Maybe traveling more or learning Spanish or just having more breathing room for your family or hobbies.
Yeah. Building on that, it's really a reevaluation of value itself. It shifts the goalpost away from just money to include the richness of experiences and maybe most importantly, the time to actually enjoy them.
Right. The time part is huge.
The old model, it often shoves all the fun stuff way off into the future.
Decades away, maybe.
Whereas this approach is about, well, how do we bring some of that into the present? How do we integrate it now?
Exactly. Which leads right into this concept he calls the new rich, or the NR.
The NR.
Now, these aren't necessarily like super wealthy people in the traditional sense.
It's not billionaires on yachts necessarily.
No, not at all. They're the ones who've figured out how to maximize their time and their mobility, where they can work when they work.
It's a totally different mindset, a different set of rules compared to what he calls the deferred life plan, the D.
Oh, yeah. We all know the D plan, right? Grind away for 40 years, sacrifice now.
Hope for the best later.
And maybe enjoy life when you're 65 or 70, if you're lucky.
What's interesting is how sharp the contrast is. The D plan assumes freedom is this reward you get after all the hard work.
Right, you earn it eventually.
But the new rich, they're aiming for a life where, payday is kind of every day in terms of lifestyle. They focus on generating income in ways that also free up their time so they can chase their passions now. Think about someone who maybe negotiates to work remotely, not just because they want to wear pajamas, but so they can live somewhere amazing, maybe near the mountains or the beach, and still get their work done effectively. That's the NR thinking.
Right. The book gives some really good examples, like someone structuring things so they can just take off for a month to travel.
Knowing the essentials are covered back home.
Yeah, or an entrepreneur who deliberately designs their business so it doesn't need them there all the time. Hands-on, day in, day out. And here's where it gets really interesting. The NRR operate on this principle that sounds kind of backward at first.
Yeah.
Less is not laziness.
That catches people off guard, I think.
It does. But it's about intentionally cutting out the busy work. The tasks that fill the day but don't actually move the needle.
Right, the noise.
So you have more mental energy, more actual time for what does matter, both at work and in your life.
Think about those endless meetings.
Oh, don't get me started on meetings. That could have been an email, right? Or reports no one reads.
Yeah.
That's the kind of less we're talking about. Pruning the meaningless stuff.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, it's a fundamental rethink of what productivity even means.
How so?
It shifts the focus away from just hours logged, butts and seats time.
Right.
To the actual results you're achieving. It's about being effective, not just efficient. Doing the right things, not just doing things right or doing lots of things.
That makes sense.
Someone who really nails that 80-20 thing, focusing on the key 20% of work that drives 80% of the outcomes and is brave enough to ditch the rest.
Yeah.
They might work fewer hours, technically, but their impact, much bigger.
Okay. So the big question for a lot of us listening is probably, how do you actually do that? Making those changes can feel, well, scary.
Absolutely. Fear is a huge factor.
And that's where Ferriss brings in this really practical tool. He calls it fear setting.
Fear setting. Okay.
He even quotes Yoda, which, always gets my attention. Named must your fear be before banish it you can.
Ha. Love a good Yoda quote.
Right. It sounds a bit, I don't know, mystical. But the actual process is surprisingly down to earth.
How does it work?
You basically sit down and define really clearly, what are you afraid of if you make this change? Let's say quitting your job or starting that side project.
Okay. List the fears.
Then you brainstorm ways to prevent those bad things from happening. What actions could you take to mitigate the risks?
Makes sense. Proactive.
And then this is key. You think about the potential benefits of actually doing it. What's the upside? Even if it's just a partial success, what could you gain by trying?
It brings up a really important question, doesn't it, for you listening? How often do we let these vague worries about what might go wrong stop us from going after what we really want right now?
All the time, probably.
Fear setting gives you a structure to actually dissect those anxieties, pull them out into the light, look at them properly, and often they're not quite as terrifying as they feel in the shadows.
The book tells this great story about a guy, Hans. He was a lawyer, making good money, but totally miserable. He did this fear-setting exercise around leaving that job to start, of all things, a surf company in Brazil.
Wow, that's a leap.
Big leap. But by actually writing down his fears like financial ruin, what will my parents think, all that stuff.
Yeah, the usual suspects.
And then mapping out concrete plans for each one, like, okay, worst case, I could do X or Y, he realized. It wasn't actually catastrophic. The downside was manageable.
And he did it.
He did. Made the jump, found a much more fulfilling life. Ferriss also talks about something interesting, how we often mask fear with fake optimism.
Fear disguised as optimism. How does that work?
Like we tell ourselves, oh, things will get better here eventually, or it's not that bad, when really we're just avoiding the scary step of actually making a change.
Right, kicking the can down the road because it feels safer.
Fear setting forces you to confront that. Is your optimism real, or is it just inertia, a comfortable excuse?
That's insightful. It reminds us that sometimes staying put isn't based on a rational choice, but just comfort. Even if it's uncomfortable comfort, if that makes sense.
Totally. We get used to the misery.
The exercise pushes you to ask, am I genuinely expecting things to improve on their own, or am I just afraid to face the possibility of failure if I try something new?
And the real takeaway here, for you listening, is to ask yourself, what's it actually costing you right now?
The cost of inaction.
Yeah. In terms of your happiness, maybe your health, missed chances, what are you losing by not making those changes you kind of know you want to make? What's the price of staying stuck?
That really flips the script. We usually focus on the potential cost of changing, but rarely add up the ongoing cost, the opportunity cost of not changing.
Okay, so you're getting clearer on your goals,
Yeah.
thinking like this new rich, tackling the fears. What's the next big piece?
Right.
Elimination. Now, again, this isn't about being lazy. It's about being incredibly strategic with your time and energy.
Cutting the fat.
Yeah.
Exactly. Ferriss leans heavily on the 80-20 principle here, Pareto's law. The idea that roughly 80% of your results come from just 20% of your activities.
Finding that critical 20%.
And he also brings in Parkinson's law, which basically says that work expands to fill the time you allow for it. Give yourself a week, it takes a week. Give yourself a day.
It miraculously gets done in a day. Funny how that works.
Isn't it? So what's fascinating is how these two ideas work together.
Yeah.
80-20 tells you what to focus on, those high-impact tasks. Parkinson's law tells you how to do it by giving yourself less time, forcing you to be efficient and cut the non-essentials.
So identify the key stuff, then give yourself tight deadlines for it.
Pretty much. Ferriss has this blunt quote, "Most things make no difference. Being busy is a form of laziness, lazy thinking, and indiscriminate action."
Ouch. But probably true for many of us.
Think about it. How much of your day is just activity versus actual progress towards important goals? The actionable thing here, start making to-do lists. Not just a to-do list, but also a not to-do list. Ooh, I like that. What won't I do today?
Exactly. What low-value stuff can you consciously decide just stop? He even suggests this intense gun-to-your-head question.
Okay.
If you absolutely had to stop doing 4 out of 5 of your most time-consuming activities, which ones would get the chop? That forces you to prioritize, right?
Wow, yeah. That really puts it in perspective. You'd have to be ruthless.
You would. And connecting this to your daily life, it means taking a really hard, honest look at where the hours go. and then being brave enough to cut the things that aren't serving your main objectives.
It's a definite shift from just being busy to being deliberately productive.
Yeah.
Less frantic motion, more focused action.
And it's not just the big projects either. Ferriss gets really practical about minimizing the daily time sucks, like email.
Ah, email, the bane of existence.
He's a big fan of email batching, checking it maybe twice a day, max, not living in your inbox.
That takes discipline.
It does, and keeping phone calls short and to the point, avoiding pointless meetings. He mentions this technique, the puppy dog close, for politely saying no to meetings.
The puppy dog close. What's that?
It's kind of like saying, I'm swamped right now, but how about we chat for 5 minutes first to see if we even need a full meeting? Often you don't.
That's clever. Filters out the unnecessary ones.
Yeah. There's an example in the book. This sales VP banned all company meetings, and apparently productivity jumped.
I believe it.
I can even think of times, personally, where just canceling one recurring meeting that wasn't really adding value, it freed up way more mental space than you'd think.
What's truly interesting, though, is how counterintuitive a lot of this feels.
Absolutely.
Especially in work cultures that still kind of worship long hours and constant availability.
Right, being seen to be busy.
These strategies are practical ways to push back and reclaim your focus, your energy from all those low-priority interruptions.
All right, so you're trimming the fat, getting super efficient. Now, how do you start building income that isn't directly tied hour for hour to your time?
The passive income dream.
Exactly. This is where the idea of the muse comes in.
Okay, the muse. What is that exactly?
In Ferriss's terms, it's basically a business designed from the start to generate income with minimal ongoing effort from you personally. Low maintenance.
Sounds good.
The key is usually creating a product, something you can sell over and over, ideally digital or easily shippable. That way you break free from trading your time for money.
Right, moving away from just selling your services by the hour or day.
Yeah. And if you think about the long-term goal here, it's about shifting from purely active income, where you have to show up and do the work to get paid, to more passive or maybe semi-passive streams, things that can bring in money even when you're, sleeping or hiking or learning Italian.
Okay, so how do you find or build one of these muses?
Well, the book gives some pretty clear criteria to aim for. It should be cheap to test the initial idea, like under $500 ideally.
Low risk to start.
Exactly. You should be able to automate most of it, the sales, the delivery, within maybe 4 weeks.
Okay.
And once it's running, it shouldn't take more than, say, 1 day a week to manage.
Wow, less than a day a week. That's the goal.
That's the ideal, yeah. He really stresses finding a niche, too. Don't try to sell everything to everyone. Focus on a specific group with a specific need.
Makes sense. Easier to target.
And he makes a strong case for charging higher prices, which might seem odd.
Higher prices, why?
Well, fewer customers often mean less customer service hassle, fewer problems. And if your product delivers real value, people will pay. Plus, higher margins give you more breathing room.
Interesting. Counterintuitive again, maybe.
A bit. He also talks about micro-testing ideas, like before you spend months building a product, run some cheap Google ads for it. See if anyone actually clicks.
Test demand before supply. Smart.
Yeah. He shares this great story about a guy, Doug, who built a website selling professional sound effects, prosoundeffects.com.
Okay.
It went from basically $0 to $10,000 a month using these principles. Niche market, automated delivery, tested the idea first.
That's pretty inspiring.
It is. So for you listening, start thinking. What skills do you have? What knowledge? What problems do you know how to solve? Could that be turned into some kind of product?
Building on that, it's really about taking what you already know, your expertise, and figuring out how to package it in a way that scales.
Yeah, package and automate.
So your income isn't capped by the number of hours you can personally work. Decoupling time from money.
Okay, let's say you've got a muse starting to bubble away,
Yeah.
bringing in some cash. Now, how do you actually escape the physical office, if that's your goal?
The liberation phase. Getting remote.
Yeah, and this is all about strategically negotiating that remote work arrangement with your current employer, if you have one.
Which can be tricky.
It can. Ferriss really emphasizes that the absolute key here is to prove you can be more productive working remotely, not less.
Right, you have to overcome that old school manager bias that if they can't see you, you're not working.
Exactly. You need to counter that perception with hard data, basically.
So how do you do that?
Well, the book shares a case study, Sherwood, who wanted to work remotely before a big trip to Oktoberfest.
Okay.
His tactics were, first, meticulously document all his accomplishments and his productivity before even asking. Show his value.
Yield the case first.
Then propose a trial period for remote work.
Yeah.
Say, let me try working from home Tuesdays and Thursdays for a month. Let's measure the results. Less threatening than asking for full remote right away.
Good idea. A pilot program.
And suggest specific days so it feels structured. Ferriss also tackles the fear around quitting a job altogether.
Yeah, that's a big one for people, the security blanket.
Huge.
Yeah.
He encourages you to kind of reframe the whole idea of permanent employment. Is anything really permanent?
Good point.
And he uses that quote from the IKEA founder, Kamprad. Only those who are asleep make no mistakes. Meaning you have to try things, risk things to move forward.
Embrace the possibility of error as part of growth.
Exactly. And a really potent, actionable insight here is to maybe do a fear-setting exercise, specifically around taking a 1-year mini-retirement.
Ooh, interesting. Fear set a sabbatical.
Yeah. What are your real fears about stepping away for a year? How could you prevent them or recover if they happened? It makes the idea feel less impossible.
This prompts you to really think, what would actually happen if you took more control over where you work and when you work?
Yeah.
How would that change not just your output, but your whole life? Your well-being, your ability to do those other things that always seem just out of reach?
And speaking of those other things, that leads perfectly into the next big idea. Mini-retirements.
Mini-retirements. I like the sound of that.
Doesn't it sound great? This isn't about that one big retirement party at 65. Forget that.
Okay.
It's about weaving these extended breaks, weeks, months, into your life now on a recurring basis. Like every few years, maybe.
So instead of saving all the fun for the end?
You sprinkle it throughout your working life. Think of them as intentional pauses to recharge, explore, learn, have adventures. Not just one final reward way down the line.
That's a radical shift in perspective from the traditional model. Retirement isn't a single event anymore. It's a recurring lifestyle element.
Exactly. It breaks that work-till-you-drop cycle.
Okay, but how practical is that? Taking months off regularly?
Well, Ferriss gives examples of people doing it, often traveling to really cool places, South America, Southeast Asia, Europe, for way less money than you'd think.
Affordable luxury, maybe?
Kinda, yeah. He shares tips on finding cheap flights, using budget airlines, finding affordable places to stay like hostels or even home exchanges.
So it doesn't have to cost a fortune.
Not necessarily. He even talks about doing it with kids, suggesting maybe shorter trial runs first and building in structured activities so it works for the whole family.
Addressing the practical concerns.
Right. So a really simple takeaway here is just to start dreaming a little. Identify one place. Where would you go if you could take, say, a 2-month mini retirement next year? Just fantasize about it. Reading this definitely got my own travel gears turning.
What's fascinating here is just realizing that these longer periods of, personal exploration and fulfillment don't have to be some far-off fantasy.
Yeah.
With some planning, maybe some muse income, some remote work flexibility, it becomes possible to actually weave them into your life now, creating a much richer, more balanced way of living.
Okay, but here's a crucial point. What happens when you actually succeed in freeing up a lot of this time? You've automated, you've eliminated. Now what?
The potential void.
Exactly. Ferriss is smart to address this. He calls it potential post-liberation depression. You get all this freedom, and suddenly it can feel a bit empty, maybe even boring if you're not prepared.
That makes sense. If your identity and schedule were totally wrapped up in work.
Right. So the final piece of this whole puzzle is consciously filling the void. It's about being proactive in adding meaningful activities and pursuits back into your life after you've cut back on work.
It raises a really important question for anyone going down this path. If work takes up less space, what fills it? What provides that sense of purpose, structure, engagement?
Ferriss really emphasizes things like service giving back, helping others, also learning new skills just for the joy of it, and seeking out new experiences.
Finding new drivers beyond the job title.
Yeah, he suggests thinking about what makes you angry about the world, what needs fixing, and also what are you genuinely proud of? Those can point towards passions.
Interesting prompts.
He talks about maybe testing out part-time work in a field you're curious about, or even a full-time vocation that feels more like a calling.
Trying things out.
But he also warns against some common traps the new rich can fall into, like thinking one project, one muse is the be-all and end-all, or forgetting about the importance of social connection and community.
Isolation can be a risk.
Definitely. It really highlights that just having free time or money isn't enough. You need purpose. You need connection. That's key for real long-term happiness.
This gets you asking yourself, doesn't it? What activities truly make me feel alive, engaged? What brings that sense of, contribution or flow or just pure joy.
Exactly. It's not just about escaping work. It's about creating a life you're excited to live.
Well put.
So as we kind of wrap up this deep dive into the 4-hour work week, let's just quickly hit the main takeaways again.
Okay, let's recap.
First, redefine your goals. Focus on designing your ideal lifestyle, not just chasing a number.
Right. Lifestyle design first.
Second, adopt that new rich mindset. Value your time and freedom just as much as, maybe more than, money.
Time and mobility are the currencies.
Third, use fear setting. It's a practical tool to stop fear from paralyzing you. Name it, plan for it, see the upside.
Confront the fear, don't let it dictate.
Fourth, master elimination. Use 80-20 and Parkinson's law to cut the fluff and focus on what matters. Create that not-to-do list.
Do less but better. Be effective, not just busy.
Fifth, explore automation. Look for ways to build income the muse that doesn't require all your time.
Decouple income from hours worked. Scalability.
Sixth, pursue liberation strategically. Negotiate remote work or make career changes that give you more control.
Take control of where and when you work.
Seventh, integrate mini-retirements. Plan for recurring breaks to live life fully now, not just later.
Sprinkle adventures throughout your life.
And finally, eighth, consciously fill the void. As you free up time, fill it with service, learning, experiences that give you meaning.
Build a life. Don't just subtract work. Find purpose. What's really significant, I think, is how all these pieces fit together. It's not just one trick. It's a whole system, a holistic approach to, well, designing a life you actually want to live.
Absolutely. So your homework, if you're up for it, take one small action today. Just one thing based on what we've talked about.
Doesn't have to be huge.
Nope. Maybe just scribble down one fear you've been avoiding or brainstorm one tiny idea for a muse. Small steps build momentum. So what does all this mean for you?
Ultimately, I think it's an invitation to stop just accepting the default path
Yeah.
and start being the architect of your own life, to design it intentionally instead of just letting it happen to you.
Well said. And maybe here's one final thought to chew on as we finish up. What's one core assumption you've been carrying around about work, about life, about how things have to be, that might actually be worth questioning?